Of the nearly 85 million workers engaged in forestry and wood-related activities around the world, 3/4 are estimated to be informal. Widespread precarious working conditions lead to alarming rates of labour injuries and fatal accidents, making forestry a high-risk industry for human rights. The UN Guiding Principles provide an umbrella framework to guide unions in engaging with stakeholders to counteract poor labour practices in the industry. When negotiating, unions can invoke the principles to request regular occupational hazard analysis and training on health and safety risks, as well as to highlight the company's responsibility to provide safety equipment, life insurance, and long-term disability cover. They are tools to call for an end to excessive overtime and compressed work schedules, as well as to push for better wages and employment conditions. Human rights due diligence across the company's operations and supply chain with genuine worker engagement can entail requiring transparency in employability arrangements down the supply chain and monitoring processes to track companies' and subcontractors' responses to reported human rights risks. All workers should have access to grievance mechanisms in line with the UN criteria and translated into local languages. When campaigning, the UN framework helps to advocate for the adoption of ethical recruitment policies to prevent debt bondage and forced labour, and to raise awareness of the importance of independent site inspections. It can also be used to call for greater involvement of unions in forestry certification processes and for a just and fair transition for forestry workers. Unions can also draw on the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, which have incorporated the UN Guiding Principles on business and human rights, and claim their application through the national contact points available in the OECD member countries. This means that unions can use NCPs that exist at the company's head office location to enforce labour rights in places where they have branches or from which they regularly source. Other tools that echo the UN Guiding Principles are the ILO's Guidelines for Labour Inspection in Forestry and the Code of Practice for Safety and Health in Forestry Work, regulatory policies such as the EU Timber Regulation and the US Lacey Act, and forest certification schemes such as FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, and PEFC, the Programme for the Endorsement of Forest Certification. The UN Guiding Principles, together with these commitments and mechanisms, can be used as a means of dialogue and pressure to help ensure a fairer deal for forestry workers worldwide.